On a day in World War II, 3 Soviet soldiers are sitting in a camp on the Finnish border. The first is named Berekov, the second is named Dmitri, and the third is named Gregory. They talked about their plans after the war ended. Berekov tells him to get married, and Gregory goes back to his parents' farm and lives there for the rest of his life. Despite their different goals, they agreed on one thing. Their war against Finland was unjust. The war was a winter war, and Dmitri was saying that the Finnish government had prepared their army for war much better than us. Their clothes were heavier, more suitable for snow, and, most importantly, their color was white. But Finland is their home, and they know how to handle snow better than we do. How do you send your soldiers into a snowy area and give them brown clothes? You're like saying to the Finnish military, "Look at me, see me here." In fact, the Soviet Union at the time was sending the army to Finland with the worst possible equipment, which meant that the movement of the Soviet army was very, very slow. Neither our clothes help in dealing with the snow nor our color helps. How do you want to make progress if the gear we're given? Berekov and Gregory look at the body of their friend Dmitri, who exploded right in front of their eyes without any warning, as if they are still trying to digest the scene. Berekov and Gregory race to the nearest rock, and what do? They were able to hide behind a large rock that protected them from this catastrophe. I expect we're at the top of the hill ahead of us. Indeed, everyone is holding their own. Gregory's plan was to peek out from behind the rock to catch a glimpse of the sniper's flash. On the battlefield, snipers would take difficult places to notice, but they had an issue, which is that the sniper's binoculars reflect the sunlight, causing a visible glare. I had the best way to spot snipers, and that's Gregory's plan. He took Gregory's divorce and noticed something strange, something shiny, and turned to Berekov in wonder. "Boy, I don't see Lebanon." Without hesitation, Berekov began to run towards the army headquarters at high speed, as if death itself was chasing him. He wanted to get out of this predicament by any means. He continued running until he finally reached the headquarters. Berekov fell to his knees and the soldiers shouted at him, "A demon is sitting and killing us mercilessly." They guided him until he began to catch his breath one by one, and one of the soldiers asked him, "Describe the sniper who killed your kin." Berekov said, "The sniper suddenly started hitting us. The day we tried to locate him, there was no sign of him." The soldier asked him another question. "Can you run? Shall I shoot you or try to catch you?" Berekov replied, "No." The soldiers all turned to each other as if they knew exactly. "Who does he mean?" One of the soldiers said to him, "We know who you mean. This sniper you encountered is the same sniper we have been circling for a long time, because of which we lost hundreds of soldiers." The White Death was the nickname of the Finnish sniper among the Russians, and they said, "Belikov, show us where your camp is today." They went to the area described by Berekov and brought with them a full cannon. They were 9. While the cannon and its 2 tanks are loaded, Berekov decides to take a breather. He said, "I want to go to him. I want to find it myself and do swatha in my sister." The location of the sniper, according to Berekov, was on the top of the hill. Berekov crept up the hill to locate the sniper's exact location and finish him off. Berekov takes a long turn and between the trees he sneaks in, until he found a large pile of snow. This is definitely where the sniper was sitting. Berekov tried to get close to the pile. His brother's cannon began to explode, knocking Berekov on his back, causing an injury to his leg from the explosion of the shell, and Berekov sat and shouted as loudly as he could so that his friends could hear him to stop the cannon, but without any result. The cannons continued to fire until sunset, and finally stopped, but now Berekov was not sure where he had disappeared, nor could he return because his leg was injured, so he started shouting with the shell. Suddenly, he began to feel the sound of footsteps coming towards him, and Berekov rejoiced that they must be my brothers hearing me. But as the day drew closer and began to clarify with the light of the moon, it became clear to Berekov that it was none other than the Finnish sniper himself. On December 17th, 1905, Simo Häyhä was born in a small village in Finland called Praujärvi. It was a rural village and they lived their lives by fishing and farming. Simo Häyhä helped with the farm work, but he always showed a great interest in hunting, and from a young age he showed his love for archery. His childhood was mostly spent hunting and farming until one day in his youth he decided to join the Finnish Civil Guard between 1920 and 1930. It was a popular choice among young Finns, especially those living in rural areas, like Simo. Simo's archery and hunting skills were one of the reasons she joined the Civil Guard. The training was intensive in the use of weapons, concealment, and resistance to difficult conditions. It was all familiar to Simo, nothing new to him. In weapons training, they were using the wave-point rifle, which enchanted Simo. He loved the gun more than anything else, so much so that he bought a special edition outside the Civil Guard out of his love for it. Most of his trainees used a special rifle scope that helped with accuracy. Except for Simo hated them. He saw that they had a lot of disadvantages, most notably the reflection of sunlight on them, and he saw that you don't even need them to aim accurately, and on the contrary, they sometimes ruin the accuracy of your aim, just like the lens of the scope sometimes gets fogged up by the cold, so Simo chose to use the weapon without them. He served in the Civil Guard until 1939. The Winter War began on Finland's borders against the Soviet invasion, which led him to transfer to the Finnish army. The Finnish army had their own weapons. Except Simo, he entered with his rifle, which he still has from the Civil Guard. Simo didn't join the army for the love of killing, of course, or out of hatred for the Soviet army. Simo went into the war with the mindset that he was just going to do what he had to do. If you ask him to defend, he will defend. Of course, I hope he attacks, he will. The war began, and Simo didn't take the war like his daily hunting routine. He didn't wait for orders from anyone. Every day he would get up a little before dawn, take with him a limited supply of food, drink, and bullets, and isolate himself in his private hideout. He would sit there waiting for the enemies until the sun went down, and then he would return to the headquarters right away, as if he was sitting in his farm hunting. He preferred to be alone but didn't mind friendships, but most of his time was spent in his own lair. In the early days of the war, Simo got up before dawn, gathered his belongings and supplies, and started looking for a good place to hide. He decided to set up his stronghold in this place and built a large pile of snow for him to sit in. The wisdom of the snow pile is bulletproof, or not necessarily bulletproof, but the most important thing is that it was hiding it. Simo called this place his private hideout. One day, Simo was waiting in his own hideout. He waits for any glimpse of a Soviet soldier, and indeed 4 soldiers stood before him. Before he hits them, Simo takes a pile of ice and puts it in his mouth. Then he grabs a gun and falls in love. Traumatized soldiers follow Thrawn and hide in anything. It doesn't note where her people came from. Key thing is hidden. Simo loves his gun. He takes a pile of ice and eats it again. The remaining soldiers, seeing the situation like this, decided to retreat because the situation is never in their favor. In warfare, often, if there is an open area and a sniper starts hitting you, the best thing to do is to retreat because it is very difficult to locate the sniper, which is often the reflection of the sun on the sniper's scope that reveals his location. But in this case, Simo did not use a scope on his weapon at all, which makes the task of locating the sniper even more difficult. In winter wars, especially in snowy areas, one of the things that can reveal the location of the enemy is the vapor of his breath. To make it more difficult to locate him, Simo ate snow so that if he breathed, he wouldn't release vapor. Some might consider it an exaggeration, but in Simo's case, anything could help him hide, so he did it. At the end of each day, Simo would return to the headquarters, and his friends would greet him and ask, "How much did you catch today?" And Simo answers, "God, today I don't know what I live for. I can only catch 9. One day, Simo was sitting in his hiding place when he saw a terrible sight, 30 soldiers heading his way. Simo loves his gun. He puts the weapon in his mouth. The highest number of daily casualties was 24 soldiers. 5 of the soldiers decided to retreat, but 1 remained steadfast, hiding behind a stone. Simo adores his weapon, and the soldier waits for it to jolt him. The soldier was just a limb. The soldier falls behind the rock and begins to tremble. Simo realizes that if he hits the soldier in a difficult area, the soldier will die instead of ending the situation quickly. Simo gets confused and fumbles with his weapon, trying to hit him in an area that will end the situation quickly instead of suffering. But unfortunately, all he sees in front of him are the soldier's feet, and Simo has nothing to show for it. However, he watches the dying soldier until he finally dies, making him the 25th highest daily casualty in Simo's history. Simo grieved and conquered the soldier. It would have been better, but Simo convinced himself that there was no time for condolences and grief. Simo would deliberately let the soldiers run away if they tried, because as we said, if he saw the invaders attack, he would defend, if he saw them run away. He hated the idea that you don't keep anyone or don't let anyone escape. He was simply seeing something that was inhuman and was not really his. But what he didn't know was that by allowing the soldiers to take frequent sunsets, he was turning the tables on them. It's easy for you to notice that Simo is a very private person and doesn't like the limelight or controversy. But if there's someone with that skill, it's hard not to start getting people interested in your skill. In Finland, he was so famous and written about in the newspapers that he had a nickname, the Magic Shooter, but in Russia it was a different story. It is said that he was so famous that the Soviet Union tried to hide any mention of him in newspapers and journals so as not to cause controversy. But it was already out of control. His stories were circulating among all the people. Hence, the Russians gave it the nickname that added to its popularity, the White Death. Hence the infamous name Häyhä. My brothers at the headquarters tried to document every moment of it if it occurred to them, so they would believe they had experienced the taste of death. All the hype may not have been what Simo was looking for, but he didn't realize the magnitude of it, so he didn't pay attention to it. One day, Simo once again went through his usual routine. He woke before dawn, gathered his belongings and supplies, and went to his hideout. As usual, he sat there waiting until he noticed something strange. 3 Russian soldiers camped out with some. But there was a war going on around them, and their location was strange. Simo feels they may be spies, but no spy camps out half the battlefield, so they're probably just stupid soldiers like the ones before them. Simo loves weapons. One of the 3 is multiplied. Simo loves his weapon again. He wants to hit the second one and plans his shot. Quickly, the 2 seize the opportunity, run away, and hide behind a rock. Simo is waiting. If they want to retreat, I'll leave them, but unfortunately, they tried to resist. One of the 2 peered over the edge of the rock to locate Simo. Simo loves his weapon, collects a pile of slug, bites down on it, and takes aim. There is only one left. It's either retreat or no retreat. After waiting, the 3rd one finally backs down and runs away as fast as he can, which is more comforting to Simo than the soldier himself, so he lowers his weapon and lets him go. The day went on without another soldier showing up, and it was getting late. Simo, for some reason, started to get a weird feeling. It's not usually this quiet. There's something strange. Simo was feeling threatened. I wanted him to back off, but I feel that this decision was not in his favor. He felt he was being watched. Simo decides to change the angle in which he always sits and watches, giving it a hook look to make sure no one is there. He took a roll and sat on a second hill to get a bird's-eye view of the whole place. Simo came across as honest. There was a Soviet sniper lurking for Simo in particular. It's only natural that Simo is now famous for his dithyrambs and the Soviets are betting on his head, so they're sure to come away with prizes. The sniper was waiting for Simo to emerge from his original hiding place. Simo sat and waited because he knew that the sniper would be able to kill Sabra. He's convinced that the dithyramb exists and retreats. Indeed, the sniper got tired of waiting, stood up, and started backing away. This was likely the only shot Simo fired out of spite. Simo Yomtov was reassured of the danger. He decided to retreat. On the way to the cache, he saw something to see. Full artillery with huge numbers of Soviets pointing the cannon at the area where Simo's hideout is located. What's happening today? How do I show him where I am? First thing, the 30 soldiers. Second thing, campers. Third thing, the sniper. Now Simo's cannon is now in a current position. Embarrassed, unable to retreat because the headquarters is far away, and afraid of cannonballs hitting him on the way, he decides to make a slightly rash decision, but in a way it is the only option available. He decides to go back to his hideout and sit in it, praying that God willing the shells do not hit him. The trees are toppled, the hills collapse. Simo is silent. The cannon continues to beat and beat until sunset. Simo is getting tired. Her ears are bursting from the shells, and suddenly, finally the Sapetians began to retreat with the cannon. Simo looks on, shocked. There's no way I could have survived that. Simo grabs his gun, giving her one last look at the bunker he's been in for months. How it was destroyed and what's left of it is no better than a snowflake, but at least he's still alive. Simo decides to run as fast as he can toward the headquarters, but suddenly he stops. He heard something strange, the sound of someone screaming. Simo rushed toward the sound of the scream, expecting one of his teammates to have been hit by the cannon. As he walked, he got closer and became clearer in the moonlight. Simo realized that the soldier shouting was not one of his colleagues, but the same soldier that Simo had allowed to retreat. None of this would have happened if Simo hadn't let anyone back down. In early 1940, Simo was transferred from the area where he was camped to a forested area near the village of Uskala, which was in the same area as Simo's camp, but on a different side. Simo at the time was close to 500 soldiers. The battles were fierce in that area. They needed more soldiers. That's why Simo and most of the people who were with him in the previous area moved to this one. It was in March 6 that the most powerful battle Simo had ever seen took place. Soviet soldiers were everywhere and it was raining from them. Simo shoots and hits until he shoots 5 people in that battle. That leaves 505 Soviet soldiers as casualties. In the Battle of March 6, one of the Soviets was very lucky and managed to hit Simo with an explosive shot to the face, a fatal blow. At the end of the battle, Finnish soldiers were collecting their dead and describing them all. One of the body movers collects the necklaces of the dead and arrives at Simo's body. Before he took his necklace, he sat and meditated. How does a great fighter like Simo die like this? He took his necklace and continued on to the next body. But suddenly he noticed something strange. Simo was still alive. The soldiers quickly took Simo to the paramedics, and from the paramedics he was taken off the battlefield and taken to the hospital where he underwent surgery. The injury was to her right cheek before an explosive bullet. Surviving an exploding bullet is almost impossible, let alone if it's in your face. Simo slept in the hospital until finally, 7 days after the incident, he began to open his eyes. Simo doesn't remember anything from the incident. All he knew was that he was standing and dancing. After the operation, they had to do a second operation to fix his face because it was disfigured. After a long period of operations and follow-ups, he finally regained his health. He was able to walk again and live normally. But Simo, after he recovered, had one request: to return to the battlefield again. And the government's response to this request was just Is the reason for the government's rejection of Simo's application firstly because of his injury? And how do you fight when you can only walk on kerosene? Secondly, Simo, or the White Death, became the emblem of the Finnish army and was considered a hero. If you have a majestic hero like the White Death, you don't want to force him and risk that he might die in the war, the Finnish government. They let him live a normal life with a big new farm as a gift from the government to serve Simo. They also gifted him with a customized version of the weapon he uses. Simo had left it as a decoration and continued to use the original weapon that he had bought long ago because he was used to it and was more comfortable with it. I mean Shab's movements. He continued his life on her new farm as a fisherman despite the circumstances. I was introduced to The White Death almost 4 years ago, and since then I've been wanting to read it, but it was put off, like it was anything I was interested in, but today I read more about it, and I understood why the government didn't want to let someone like Simo go, because he was a symbol of courage for the Finns. I can't describe it, The White Death. Someone who, despite the sights I saw and the deadly situations he went through, lived the rest of his life normally without any psychological issues. Even from the words of the people who buried the White Death, they all described him as a very humble and funny man. Simo Häyhä was the Finnish military's best example of courage and cunning, and Simo's fighting techniques are still studied. In one of Simo's interviews, an interviewer asked him, "If you had one piece of life skills advice, what would it be?" His answer was, "One word: training."